brain cells are to us? That, advanced as the knowledge it implied might be, was closer to the heart of the possible. I bent, determined despite the well nigh unconquerable shrinking I felt, to touch the tablet's rods. A flickering shadow fell upon me. A flock of pulsating ochreous and scarlet shadows. The Keeper glowed above us. In a life that has had its share of dangers, its need for quick decisions, I recognize that few indeed of my reactions to peril have been more than purely instinctive, no more consciously courageous nor intellectually dissociate from the activating stimulus than the shrinking of the burned hand from the brand, the will to live dictated rush of the cornered animal upon the thing menacing it. One such higher functioning was when I followed Larry O'Keefe and Lakla, the handmaiden, out to what we believed soul-destroying death, in a place almost as strange as this. Footnote: see the Moon Pool and Conquest of the Moon Pool. Another was now. Deliberately, detachedly, I studied the angrily flaming shape. Compared to it, we were as a pair of hop-o'-my thumbs to the giant. Had it been man-shaped, we would have come less than a third way up to its knees. I focused my attention upon the 20-foot wide square that was the Keeper's foot. Its surface was jewel smooth, hyaline, yet beneath it was a suggestion of granulation, of close-packed, innumerable microscopic crystals. Within these grains, whose existence was more sensed than seen, glowed dull red light, smoky and sullen. At each end of the square, close to the bottom, was a diamond-shaped lozenge, cabochon, perhaps a yard in width. These were dim yellow, translucent, with no suggestion of the underlying crystallization. Sense organs I set them down to be, similar to the great ovals within the Emperor's golden zone. My gaze traveled up to the transverse arms. They stretched 60 feet from tip to tip. At each tip were two more of diamond figures, not dull, but burning angrily with orange and scarlet luster. In the center of the beam was something that might have been a smoldering, rubrous reflection of the Emperor's pulsing, multicolored rose, had each of the petals of the latter been clipped and squared. It deepened toward its heart into a singular pattern of vermilion latticings. Into the entire figure ran numerous tiny rivulets of angry crimson and orange light, angling in interwoven patterns with never a curve nor arching. Set at intervals between them were what looked like octagonal rosettes filled with slender, silvery flutings, wan striations like, it came to me, immense chrysanthemum buds, half opened and carved in gray jade. Above towered the gigantic vertical beam. Toward its top I glimpsed a huge square of flaring crimsons and bright topaz. Two other diamonds stared down upon us from just beneath it, like eyes. And over all its height the striated octagons clustered. I felt myself lifted, floated upward. Drake's hand shot out, clung to me as together we drifted up the living wall. Opposite the latticed heart of the square-petaled rose our flight was checked. There for an instant we hung. Then the octagonal symbols stirred, unfolded like buds. They were the nests of the Keeper's tentacles, and out from them the whip-like tendrils uncoiled, shot out and writhed toward us. My skin flinched from their touch. My body, held in the unseen grip, was motionless. Yet when they touched, their contact was not unpleasant. They were like flexible strands of glass. Their smooth tips questioned us, passing through our hair, searching our faces, writhing over our clothing. There was a pulse in the great clipped rose, a rhythmic throbbing of vermilion fire that ran into it from the angled veins, beat through the latticed nucleus and throbbed back whence it had come. The huge, high square of scarlet and yellow was liquid flame. The diamond organs beneath it seemed to smoke, to send out swirls of orange-red vapor. Holding us so, the Keeper studied us. The rhythm of the square rose, became the rhythm of my own mind. But here was none of the vast, serene, and elemental calm that Ruth had described as emanating from the Metal Emperor. Powerful it was, without doubt, but in it were undertones of rage, of impatience, overtones of revolt, and something incomplete and struggling. Within the disharmonies I seemed to sense a fettered force striving for freedom, energy battling against itself. Greater grew the swarms of the tentacles, winding about us like slender strands of glass, covering our faces, making breathing more and more difficult. There was a coil of them around my throat and tightening, tightening. I heard Drake gasping, laboring for breath. I could not turn my head toward him, could not speak. Was this then to be our end? The strangling clutch relaxed. The mass of the tentacles lessened. I was conscious of a surge of anger through the cruciform thing that held us. Its sullen fires blazed. I was aware of another light beating past us, beating down the Keepers. The hosts of tendrils drew back from me. I felt myself picked up from the unseen grasp, whirled in the air, and drawn away. Drake beside me, I hung now before the shining disk, the Metal Emperor. He it was who had plucked us from the Keeper, and even as I swung I saw the Keeper's multitudinous serpentine arms surge out toward us angrily and then sullenly, slowly draw back into their nests. And out of the disk, clothing me, permeating me, came an immense tranquility, a muting of all human thought, all human endeavor, an unthinkable cosmic calm into which all that was human of me seemed to be sinking, drowning as in a fathomless abyss. I struggled against it, desperately, striving in study of the disk to erect a barrier of preoccupation against the power pouring from it. A dozen feet away from us the sapphire ovals centered upon us their regard. They were limpid, pellucid as gems whose giant replicas they seemed to be. The surface of the disk, ringed about by the aureate zodiac in which the 9 ovals shone, was a maze of geometric symbols traced in the lines of living gem fires. Infinitely complex, those patterns, and infinitely beautiful. An infinite number of symmetric forms in which I seemed to trace all the ordered crystalline wonders of the snowflakes, the groupings of all crystalline patternings, the soul of ordered beauty that are the marvels of the Radiolaria, Nature's own miraculous book of the soul of mathematical beauty. The flashing petaled heart was woven of living rainbows of cold flame. Silently we floated there while the disk looked at us. And as though I had been not an actor but an observer, the weird picture of it all came to me. 2 men swinging like motes in midair. On one side the flickering scarlet and orange cruciform shape, on the other side the radiant disk, behind the 2 mannequins the pallid mount of the bristling cones, and high above the wan circle of the shields. There was a ringing about us, an elfin chiming. Sweet and crystalline it came from the cones, and strangely it was their vocal synthesis, their voice. Into the vast circle of sky pierced a lance of green fire. Swift in its wake uprose others. We slid gently down, stood swaying at the disk's base. The Keeper bent, angled. Again the planes above the supporting square hovered over the tablet. The tendrils swept down, pushed here and there, playing upon the rods some unknown symphony of power. Thicker pulsed the lances of the aurora, changed to vast billowing curtains. The faceted wheel at the top of the central spire of the cones swung upward. A light began to stream from the cones themselves. No pillar now, but a vast circle that shot whirling into the heavens like a noose. And like a noose it caught the aurora, snared it. Into it the coruscating mists of mysterious flame swirled, lost their colors, became a torrent of light flying down through the ring as though through a funnel top. Down poured the radiant corpuscles bathing the cones. They did not glow as they had beneath the flood from the shields, and if they grew it was too slowly for me to see. The shields were motionless. Now here, now there, I saw the other rings whirl up, smaller mouths of lesser cones hidden within the body of the metal monster. I knew, sucking down this magnetic flux, these countless ions gushing forth from the sun. Then as when first we had seen the phenomenon, in the valley of the blue poppies, the ring vanished, hidden by a fog of coruscations, as though the force streaming through the rings became diffused after it had been caught. Crouching, forgetful of our juxtaposition to these 2 unhuman, anomalous things, we watched the play of the tentacles upon the upthrust rods. But if we forgot, we were not forgotten. The Emperor slipped nearer, seemed to contemplate us quizzically, amused, as a man would look down upon some curious and interesting insect, a puppy, a kitten. I sensed this amusement in the disk's regard, even as I had sensed its soul of awful tranquility, as we had sensed the playful malice in the eye stars of the living corridor, the curiosity in the column that had dropped us into the valley. I felt a push that was filled with a colossal, glittering playfulness. Under it I went spinning away for yards, Drake twirling close behind me. The force, whatever it was, swept out from the Emperor, but in it was no slightest hint of anger or of malice. No slightest shadow of the sinister. Rather it was as though one would blow away a feather, urge gently some little lesser thing away. The disk watched our whirlings with a sparkling jeweled laughter in its pulsing radiance. Again came the push, farther yet we spun. Suddenly before us, across the pave, shone out a twinkling trail, the wakened eyes of the cubes that formed it, marking out a pathway for us to follow. Immediately upon their gleaming forth I saw the Emperor turn, his immense oval metallic back now black against the radiance of the cones. Up from the narrow gleaming path, a path opened I knew by some command, lifted the hosts of tiny unseen hands, the sentient currents of